Hello, everyone, once again, and welcome to the Bible Beyond the Basics podcast. We gather again with you as I am your host, Jason Clapper, and co-host Bob Andrews. We thank you so much for joining us today. Today is episode 22, and today we're so excited to talk about a special topic, hell. Bob, I just got a simple question for you today.
All right.
Has anybody ever told you to go to hell?
I grew up in New Jersey. That was the.
What's your best comeback to that line?
This is how I'll see you there. Yeah. I mean, that's the nicest thing somebody says there.
Yes. Well, I was gonna. It'd be too complicated of a response, but my best response would be, I've been there.
Yeah.
You know, when I took a trip to Israel a few years ago, and you know, you're driving along, and right near the entrance to Jerusalem, there's this beautiful green valley with some nice walkways. You can go on a nice walk there, spend some time there, and that's the Valley of Hinnom, the Valley of Gehenna, the place where the name for hell originates from. Yeah. And so, you know, I've been there. You can go there too.
Well, it sounds quite lovely. So now, was there a figure with horns and a pitchfork at the?
I think he was on break at the time.
Okay. We're getting into the subject of hell and heaven. And I think, my punchline was going to be, we're all going to find out someday how accurate we are. But I'm starting off now with that line because we're going to provide some possibilities here of how one can assess this and deal with it. Because the thing that has dawned on me for years is we have used this hell and heaven, even our own Westminster Confession of Faith in chapter 32 talks about the state of man after death and how we have an immortal subsistence, immediately return to God, who gave them once we die and we return to dust and our bodies see corruption. The souls of the righteous being made perfect in holiness are received into the highest heavens. They behold the face of God in light and glory. Waiting for the full redemption, because we have to wait until the second coming for judgment. The dead are the dead. But the souls of the wicked are cast into hell, where they remain in torments and utter darkness, reserved to the judgment of the great day. And we hear this all the time, both in a lot of literature and stories and our cartoons with Peter at the gate.
Yeah,
and is your name in the book?
Yeah.
Who makes it? It's sort of like, do we have the sufficient merit badges to be saved?
And that's what it all tends to be about, right? Mm-hmm. It all tends to be about, are we good enough? Are we good enough for Jesus? Are we going to make it? And if you do make it, there's this wonderful, glorious thing. But if you lied too many times, you had one too many beers, maybe you're burning in hell forever.
Yeah.
That's the real concern, right?
And that's that fire and brimstone preachers, the lake of fire that's in Revelation, or the fornicators and idolaters and liars and thieves, which means a lot of us, especially in politics, will not inherit the kingdom of heaven. Mm-hmm. Of course, my question always remains, are we talking present tense or future tense?
Sure.
because I know if I'm a liar, I'm not really in a good Jesus place.
Yeah, well, when Jesus came and said the kingdom of heaven is here, I think there was also an implication that hell was kind of here too.
Right. And so does that fire and brimstone stuff still have the motivating force that it used to in our society, through our churches?
Yeah, I think the realm that the fire and brimstone place is coming from is a different kind of reality than the one we live in. You see some of the evidence of that, especially early on in the church with So it's part of the reason why Luther, early on, some of his thoughts about leaving the church had to do with the way that hell was presented and purgatory and such. Coin in the coffer rings, here's the soul out of purgatory springs. But also, where that fire and brimstone comes from, it's during the revivalist time. It dates to around the time of Jonathan Edwards, and
in the early 18th century.
yeah, and he has one of the most famous fire and brimstone sermons, and perhaps the place where the term fire and brimstone came from, the sinners in the hands of an angry God. People are just worms. God is so big, he could just step on the people and such. But the interesting thing about that is Edwards preached that and people cried and wailed, and he was a bit of a circuit preacher. He used it 3 times and then he got rid of it because he didn't like the response that it got from people, and he felt it got away from the core aspect of the grace of the gospel of God.
Grace. Which is a better motivator?
Yeah.
And I think that's, again, and I remember someone in this congregation came up to me and said, "You don't preach enough about the afterlife and about how we sort of have to get into heaven." Because I've always been, and part of my background as a moderate Presbyterian of the classic school, have always more emphasized, I really not terribly concerned. In fact, that's my whole concept of predestination. And I may be muddying the waters at this point, but the whole concept of predestination is your destination is in the hand of God. Trust it, don't worry about it, and use it to focus on what you have to do today.
Yeah.
I've always been much more of a contemporaneous religious person.
Yeah, God will handle all that.
Yeah, no. So I'm really not concerned. Even though the history of humanity is fascinating, if you look at our funereal rites, and I remember it was just over there here in this great room. We had a casket, and I had loaned somebody one of my very important Princeton Seminary pocket Bibles, and I had loaned it to him to read to his mother while mother was dying, and then. Somehow I never got the Bible back, and I found it was going to be inside the casket. And we put all these things in the casket. Well, the Neanderthals did that also. The Egyptians did that also, putting tools and weaponry. In China,
They might need it.
Pardon?
They might need it.
They might need it. Yeah. So we had this concept of the afterlife from the very beginning.
Native Americans sprinkle tobacco. The more tobacco that you throw into the fire, the more tobacco they'll have for the journey to the afterlife.
Oh, I didn't know that. I like that.
If you've been real well loved, you'll get a lot of tobacco, and people will just bring piles of it and throw it onto the fire.
Well, being a pipe smoker, someone who actually wants to get back to pipe smoking, I like that idea.
You know what they have in the library at Pittsburgh Theological Seminary? They've got one of Karl Barth's Meerschaum pipes.
Oh, okay, wonderful.
If you go and ask sometime, they'll let you see it.
Oh, fun. So we do this too. We put things in caskets or tombs. The concept of they're going to need to read the Bible in the afterlife. Well, I think they're with the living Word, so I don't think they need to actually have a Bible study.
Yeah.
But
maybe there'll be a quiz at the pearly gates.
But we do it for us. That's right. Well, and Peter's at the desk. All these cartoons. Again, they're fun. It's interesting. It signals what we really think, because we're worried about what's beyond the great ending of us all. And the Bible offers a lot of thoughts, especially in the New Testament. It might surprise a lot of our congregants to realize the Old Testament really doesn't care much about the afterlife. There's very little in there about what happens after you die. One of the great lines of, for example, with David, when upon his death and the others, is they sleep with their fathers. Which is quite literal, because what they would do is let the body decay, they gather up the bones and put it on the pile of bones in the tomb with all the preceding fathers. So you actually are with your fathers. They didn't have much of a concept. That's a much later notion that sort of resulted from...
There's a few things there, but it's it's all kind of sketchy. You've got Samuel talking to, I think it's Saul from the afterlife. He conjures him like a witch might or something like that. But even the word Sheol, it just means the grave, basically.
Right, those words, actually, because so much later got influenced by the Hellenist society and Greek mythology, because usually the references to hell are our understanding of hell, and we want to get back to the one that you visited, because that's the key one. Our understanding is Hades or Sheol, the place of shades. It comes from Greek mythology, the god Hades, one of the Titans who rules the underworld with Persephone.
Yeah, but none of those words are actually in the Old or New Testament. Well, there's a couple of words in the New Testament, but the main one is Gehenna.
Yeah. And these are associations that we have, like the grave or the deep or the abyss. The thinking was then, because you mentioned the tobacco goes up. And if you understand heaven, the Greek word for heaven is actually Uranos. Which is the only Greek planet in our solar system. The rest are all Roman. Mercury.
Yeah.
They took Pluto out, Jupiter, but Uranus, Uranus, is the Greek word, and it means just basically the heavens, the sky. And that's why you would have sacrifices, because something that would be sacrificed could go up. Into the heavens.
Because that's where God was.
Because that's where God was, that the lightness, the airiness, what is beyond. The underground became the place of torment and the grave or the abyss and dark, because it is. What are you going to do if you see a volcano? You see lava. You go into a pit and it's dark. You don't have light anymore. You can't see. And if you've ever experienced absolute darkness, it's terrifying. We actually had that episode once in Maine. We were visiting a friend, and we took our dog. We were out right on the coast of Maine in his cottage. And he's an artist and painted, and he's a beautiful guy. Well, we wanted to go out for a walk, to take the dog for a walk. The dog would not step off the porch. The dog could not see. And it occurred to me, and I studied a little bit, you don't see light, you see by light. And so absolute darkness, you could literally, and I did put up my hand in front of my face and I couldn't see a thing. This is terrifying.
Yeah.
And so the idea of the Hades, or eventually Pluto, ruler of the underworld, that you have to go down, you cross the river, you got Styx, you got the Acheron, you got Cerberus, you got all those, and the ferryman. It's a trip. And you got some good stuff, which is the Elysian fields, okay? But then you have the other place where it's just empty shades. And all the Greek myth writers talk about that. Yeah.
I'm not quite as familiar with... I know some of the stuff about Greek mythology. I've been studying about Nordic mythology a little bit recently. And one of the interesting things, there's not actually a place for hell in Nordic mythology. It's not a land, but all of the different lands that exists, you can actually get to all of them. So like the heaven concept, you can travel there if you go far enough. And there's also, while there isn't hell, there is a ruler of the underworld, Hel or Hela, who takes care of the dead. And so this is a concept that we find in multiple mythologies and understandings throughout history. Yeah. It's a way that people deal with the world. People want to know what's going to happen.
Yeah, what's going to happen, because it's the great unknown. The undiscovered country in Shakespeare, but we're all going to get a chance to discover it.
Yeah.
Which also then kind of leads to the idea what is going to be our last words. And you see, you can look up a lot of famous last words. I know one poet, kind of a fun pastor poet, said his father's last words were "Change the furnace filter." And having blessed his kin with this bon mot, slipped down the road we all must go. It made us sad to lose our dad, but his dying words weren't half bad. So yeah, I guess we have to laugh about it because it is scary, it's dreadful, but also isn't the whole concept of the good news not for us to be terrified about what's to come?
Yeah.
Isn't that our responsibility and calling?
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of if Luther basically, if he was going to die today, he'd plant a tree. The whole concept that everything goes on, everything continues. I find it lovely in Native American tradition. There's this whole concept of thinking about how do our actions affect the seventh generation to come from now. Not just our kids, not just our grandkids, but how will what we're doing today affect those who are in the future?
Yeah, I think what's important is for us to realize, as much as we love Christianity and believe the revelation of Christ is the way, the truth, and the life, how similar we are to so many other religions in practice, and what that is expressing about us and our anxieties, worries, hopes, and fears. The idea of looking ahead, or what is the future to bring, our funereal rites. We're all very similar.
We all have these certain things that are just human aspects about us that we find different ways to deal with, but there's a reality that exists across all of our experiences despite our languages and such. Yesterday we just had a big conversation about Mary and Martha and Jesus going in and Mary was sitting there, Martha was cleaning. I was wondering where Lazarus might have been in that whole instance. What's he up to? But it was just like, how many of us, got to clean the house. We've got people coming over and all of that. Yeah. And across generations, across timelines, across religions, there's so much that is the same about all of us.
Yeah, and I particularly love that episode because she's making such a fuss about it. She's the angry kitchen lady. Yeah. Well, the younger sister isn't here.
Yes. Yeah.
So, of course, we can have more fun because I think Judas was the other brother.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the Bethany connection where they live. But that's kind of mean. Why he was upset with his sister spending the money.
Yeah. So, sure.
But, yeah, the whole concept of hell and heaven. Again, what we're emphasizing, it's common throughout so many cultures, including ours. It's expressing something of our hopes and fears. It's not common an issue in the Old Testament until much later. It's used by Jesus mostly, as I interpret, in the present tense. It's fascinating that when he's talking about hell, he's talking to all the righteous people who are obeying the commandments, the Pharisees. When he's talking about grace, he's talking to all the prostitutes and lepers, the people who have been outcast in society.
Yeah.
So I think I've always thought Jesus' emphasis was on the present tense of inheriting the kingdom of God. Again, because if my life is in discord with my behavior, I am not living in the kingdom. Because, again, where I land is we do damage when we keep with the sort of the Greek mythology, which was not really supposed to be taken literally. It was expressive. It was poetical. And the idea is that we tend to turn it into a place. That hell and heaven are places. Now, you saw the real place.
Yeah. Okay. The thing I think we need to understand with that contextually is that Jesus was taking, and I mean, when we're talking about Gehenna, the person who talks about hell more than anyone else in the New Testament especially is Jesus. And the word that's primarily used there is Gehenna, which refers to a place. But I don't think that it's necessarily like he was saying you're going to go to hell. I think he was talking about that place, the literal actual place, as an example of what our lives were like in not following God and not following the way. For example, this place Gehenna is a beautiful place now, but even as far back as the book of Isaiah, initially the first time we hear of this land, it's a place that's being used for child sacrifice to the god Baal. And so that's going on, and so it's a cursed place that's spoken against. And then later on, by the time of Jesus, it becomes a trash dump. So people would go, they would bring their trash. There was a fire that started, but it's constantly burning because people are bringing their trash and stuff like that there. One example I heard of it once was that dogs might come and fight over the bones of the trash that's there.
Yeah.
And so Jesus says there will be gnashing of teeth. Well, he could just point over there and say, like, look at these dogs that are there right now. They're fighting over those bones. There's gnashing of teeth. He's not talking about something that we can't... He's trying to use the example to help us to understand the concept that he's talking about, because it's a real place we could look at.
And to emphasize, you have a choice. And there's times a cudgel is needed to bash. That's what a shepherd's crook is. It's a cudgel to bash or drag the sheep to get them into the right place. But it's better to love them and have them know your name and follow, because this emphasis on living in the current reality of God will allow you to have confidence as to what is going to happen down the road. I am not one that wants to use threat. There's times when you have to scold or admonish. We're good at that. See, it's very careful to this audience to say, in us talking about this hell and heaven business, we're not discounting the reality of evil.
I think it's more of a concept of, it's not discounting at all the reality of evil. He's not saying there is no such concept as heaven and hell. It's just that the concept of heaven and hell aren't necessarily this place that he's pointing to, saying, if you're bad, you're going to go here. If you're good, you're going to go here. He's saying there's a reality that exists around us, and perhaps it's this Gehenna reality that's further and broader than we realize. Hell exists in this real world, and in coming to this earth, Jesus brings with him, in any place that he is, the kingdom of heaven. And so as we come to know God, as we live out our lives in discipleship, heaven exists within us. Heaven spreads as far as God exists, as far as the Holy Spirit moves and enters into or speaks against these realms of hell that exists in the world. Right. You want to know if hell exists, just look around.
Right.
Look at all of the slaughter and evil and whatnot that we find in the world. That's hell is all around us if we'll open our eyes.
The distortion of that which is the grace and the love of God. Which is my sort of closing line has always been, please don't think of it as a place, either heaven or hell. Think of it as a relationship. And what are you bringing to it? And what can you receive from it? Yeah.
And to me, it's the closer that we are to God, the closer we are to heaven. The more God is living there, the more. Yeah.
Very good.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.